Hi, we have jumped all the way to the 1900s. I am standing in front of Farmamerica's historic 1930s farmhouse. Inside the farmhouse, we are going to learn all about what life was like over 100 years ago. So, before we get into that, let's talk about what life is like today, and then we can compare and see how different it is today from 100 years ago. So, before we get started, I have a few questions for you. How do you communicate with your family and friends today? If you're close by to them, you might greet them with a friendly wave or a smile or a hi, how are ya? Something where they can see you. If you're separated from them or if they're far away from you, you might use technology. Some of these technologies might be social media or text messaging, using your cell phone or home phone to give them a call when you want to say hi. But how do you think people did this over 100 years ago? We're going to step inside the 1930s house to find out. Oh, hi, you caught me in the middle of my favorite book. They were just talking about how a bad storm was coming through. That reminds me, have you ever had the power or electric go out in your home or maybe even at school because there was a bad storm nearby, or even maybe the electric company had a power outage in your area? Well, 100 years ago, they did not have to worry about that because in farmhouses, in rural areas, they didn't even have electricity. They had nothing to power their devices, which they also didn't have. If they wanted light to read by or light to work by when it got dark in the evening, they would turn to their oil lamp. Powered by a wick and oil, they would start the flame, and this is how they would get the light that they needed to eat dinner with a family or to read their favorite book. Now, what are some things that you can think of that are powered by electricity that they would not have had 100 years ago? I want you to go find your nearest keyboard, whether it's on a computer or a cell phone, a tablet, or even what you're watching this video on right now. Look at the letters and notice how they're ordered. Does it seem a little odd? Why aren't they ordered from A to Z in alphabetical order? Doesn't that make more sense and seem a little bit easier? Well, I can tell you that the arrangement of the regular keyboard has been around since the 1800s, and the keyboard that we know and love today is here to stay. This arrangement showed up on a typewriter, the Scholes and Glidden typewriter. But what is a typewriter? Let's take a closer look. This is our typewriter at Farmamerica. Now, typewriters were one of the first in-home printing technologies and communication technologies to take off in the late 1800s. If you were lucky enough to have a typewriter in your home, you might use it to leave a note for your family, write a letter to someone who is far away, leave a diary entry, or even write a page to a book. Something different from these typewriters, from the computers that we have today, even though they both have keyboards and the keyboards still look the same, typewriters were not run on electricity. You didn't have to plug them in and there were no wires. All it took was someone sitting at the typewriter, pressing the button to press the pad into the ink and the ink to the paper to leave a mark in the form of a letter. Now, a difference that is additional is that there was no backspace. So if you made a mistake, it stayed on the paper or you had to cross it out with ink. So what are some other differences in technology 100 years ago than the technology we have today? What do you do to pass the time? What do you do for fun? Some of you might hang out with your friends, some of you might watch YouTube or play video games or just play outside with your family and have fun. But what do you think kids and families did 100 years ago to pass the time and have fun? There was no YouTube, there was no iPods or iPhones or apps or tablets to keep them busy, but there was radio. When electricity came to the country in the 1930s, some families were lucky enough to get their hands on a transistor radio, and these radios required electricity, so not all farm families had them. But if they did, families would often gather around the radio where they would listen to their favorite music or listen to their favorite radio shows because there still was no TV, and this is how families and kids would pass the time in the 1930s.